You are listening to Talking Africa, the podcast that gets you behind the news from the continent, brought to you by the Africa Report. My name's Nicholas Milbrook, and for all your Africa analysis, do head to theafricareport.com. This week, South Africa's elections, and a conversation with our South Africa editor, Crystal Orderson, about what lies ahead. Will Ramaphosa get his majority? Are we looking at an era of coalitions in South Africa? How has the fight against corruption been progressing? And who might be in a Ramaphosa 2.0 cabinet? We began by talking about the closing rallies held this weekend, where all the major parties converged on Gauteng, the battleground province.
Gauteng is, of course, the economic heartland of South Africa, and it's also the province that seemingly seems up for grabs. And so hence we saw the ANC having their final rally. 70,000 people came out to listen to Cyril Ramaphosa. The EFF, a few kilometers away, also having their final rally just outside of Joburg, equally getting thousands coming out. And then the DA also having their final rally and getting, about 40,000 plus people to come out to listen to them. And so we've seen that there's different polls that have told us that the ANC's majority is under threat. And this means that it's game open for potential coalition between the different parties. And in 2014, the party received just over 53% of the provincial vote. And at that time, the ANC could still count on a level of support from citizens. But we saw in the 2016 election, the ANC getting an absolute beating when they lost the crown of all municipalities, that is Johannesburg, and also the capital, Tshwane. And that really showed that ANC voters stayed away because they would not vote for any other party, and the DA could get their supporters to come out to vote. And so we hear from analysts again telling us that if the ANC voters stay away in this election, they will once again give some victory to the other parties. But there's also the EFF, which is now for the first time really have come out, put in a lot of resources, and have really gone on the campaign trail in Gauteng. And so now it's really game on for, the spoils between the DA and the EFF. And hence, this is the province that's up for grabs, and that's really going to give us an indication of what the ANC support is like and where the DA and the EFF stand.
If the real problem is for the ANC, how do we get people out? What is their game plan? What do they have, sort of a secret weapon in Gauteng that they can use to galvanize voters in these final days and hours?
Well, Nick, I spent some time in Johannesburg recently, and that was my question to Black voters. What is their sense of the ANC? And to be honest with you, Nick, I was shocked at the response. And these were what we call the upper end of the black middle class, and a term that was devised here called the so-called clever blacks. And they were all simply upset with the ANC. They were saying that they are not going to vote for the ANC. They would be more inclined to vote for the EFF, perhaps even a smaller party like the United Democratic Movement, which is led by Bantu Lamisa. But the absolute distrust that they have of the ANC was absolutely shocking. And this is, of course, the black middle class. This is the people that are paying their taxes, that have traditionally supported the ANC. And they were really quite upset. And I asked them, what's the reasons for this absolute anger towards the ANC? And they really feel it's corruption. They really feel the state of what had happened during the Zuma years, which is now also defined as the 9 lost years. People just feel absolutely angry about it, and they feel that the ANC need to be taught a lesson, and they are not going to give their vote. And I was quite surprised by it. So they say provincially they will vote for another party, but nationally they will vote for Cyril Ramaphosa because he is the best person to lead the country. And so it was quite interesting that that was the sense from black middle class voters. Then we posed the same question to white middle class voters, and they were quite intrigued. Well, I was intrigued by the answer, which has been proven by some polls done by the ANC, is that they are inclined to vote for another party on the provincial ballot, but then vote for Cyril Ramaphosa on the national ballot. And you cannot believe it, Nick. Today I had some discussion with white voters, and that's exactly the game plan. There really seems to be a sense from white middle class voters that nationally Cyril Ramaphosa is the country's best bet, and not the DA, which is their voting base. But provincially, they might still give the DA a chance. So firstly, so that is the sense from voters. We will obviously have to see on the 8th of May whether that analysis is in fact true or not. But back to Johannesburg, ultimately, because this is the economic heartland of the country, and we do have two Johannesburg, so to say, one rich Sandton, the most expensive square mile per kilometer in the country, versus Alexandra Township, also known as Alex, a few kilometers away, where the reality is so different. In Sandton, you walk and you think you in the best financial district anywhere, could be New York, could be London. You cross 5 kilometers later and you're in absolute squalor where people do not have access to running water, electricity, job creation is almost non-existent, and service delivery also very bad. And so that's the reality of the two South Africas. And in Johannesburg and in Gauteng, voters feel that those that have a lot, and those that don't have, don't have anything. And that's where I think the economic freedom fighters are coming in the middle to really disrupt things. And so we might be looking at coalition government in Gauteng, Nick.
What would that create then if you had the ANC in power nationally and then lots of other smaller but substantial powers taking provincial governments? Is that a recipe for gridlock? Is it perhaps, just looking at the glass half full, does it give Ramaphosa the cover he might need to be a bit more radical in the reforms that he wants to pursue?
Well, I think it would be a double-edged sword because, firstly, we've never truly gone into coalition governments in South Africa. We've had the first coalition in the Western Cape when the ANC wasn't able to get a majority a few years ago, and they went into they were the majority party, but they weren't able to get a coalition together, and the DA was able to get a coalition together. So that was basically your first sense of coalition politics in South Africa. We've, however, seen that coalition politics in our recent examples of Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, Tshwane, and Johannesburg have not been that successful. And especially the Nelson Mandela, if we take that as a particular case study where we had the Democratic Alliance and the EFF in coalition partners, the relationship went totally sour, and we now have the UDM, which had very little votes, in power with the EFF. And it seems in that particular city, service delivery has come to a halt. There's total, if I look at all the emails and statements I get from the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, seems service delivery is at a halt. There's intra-party politicking happening. There's vote of no confidences happening all the time. And there really seems to, the ordinary people who want to see delivery is not getting that. So that's what we've seen in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. And that is scary for some voters. In Johannesburg and Tshwane, we've had mixed, because it's quite interesting. The EFF's Julius Malema have come out quite openly saying that Herman Mashaba is the best mayor that Johannesburg has ever had, and they will fight for him. He can leave the DA, but they want Herman Mashaba to be the mayor. In Tshwane, it's been mixed messages with Salim Simanga resigning. There's been a lot of internal squabbles within the coalition. And again, that's left a very bitter taste for some voters. And so that comes to mind when people are thinking of coalitions. What kind of coalition will we see? Will they be able to work together, and will it benefit the citizens of the country? Now, in recent times here in the Western Cape, there's posters going up all over with the headline "Stop an ANC EFF Coalition." Now, ironically, the ANC and the EFF have actually never gone into any coalition government. And the ANC here in the Western Cape, was at pains to send out statements to say that they've dismissed any false rumors about, the intention that they see is simply to confuse voters. There's been no coalition talks taking place at all between the ANC or any other party. And the ANC hit back saying, in fact, it's the DA who had compromised their values when they joined the EFF, when they went into coalition in those cities that I just mentioned. And so that comes to mind for the whole issue of coalition politics, but I do think that's going to be a reality. I suspect here in the Western Cape that might be very true. The Democratic Alliance's majority is really under threat, especially given the entry of Patricia de Lille, who's a very popular politician in the Western Cape, as the former Cape Town mayor, entering the political fray and the political arena here. And so there might be those that are angry with the DA that might want to vote for Patricia de Lille. And I think it's highly unlikely, for instance, that Patricia de Lille would go into coalition with the DA, because they are still at war with each other.
In Gauteng, there's the potential for the ANC to lose, but who would be the major beneficiary from that?
Well, I think the EFF most probably would be the most likely beneficiary, because they've already come out to say that they will be coalition partners in Gauteng, in Limpopo, in the Northern Cape. And if they are going to be coalition partners in the provincial government sphere, they want to have a slice of the cake. And that means they want to run Tshwane municipality. So I think there's going to be a lot of horse trading post the 11th of May, when the election results will be announced. And I suspect the EFF is looking at the 2021 local government elections, where they want to improve on their current standing. And if they should run some municipalities, they can show the electorate that they are more than just the Red Berets shouting down politicians, but that they can deliver. That's the one strategy. And in the other provinces, they are willing to work with like-minded partners. And I think in the past, they would be completely dismissive of the ANC. I think they are now less likely to be dismissive of the ANC.
Right. So we could potentially, even though everyone dismisses it, we could see the ANC and the EFF running Gauteng. But wouldn't then that be the kiss of death for the EFF, who sort of, if they get, in the public eye, equated one with the other, it would be tough, given they've spent so much time, attacking the ANC for corruption, etc. To turn around and then work with them might seem strange.
It would be, and I think some of their voters would be quite disappointed, because those that have been voting or will be voting for the EFF is because they are not the ANC. And so, given that they've been working with the DA on, like in Johannesburg and in Tshwane, and they seem to have a far better relationship than what they had, for instance, in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, I suspect the EFF is more likely to work with the DA. But, losing Gauteng for the ANC would be an emotional, it would be heartbreak. I think it would be like having a knife put through your heart. And I think the ANC I don't think they're ready to deal with that possibility.
Right. So they're going to try and hold on at all costs. Have people started to look at, the different scenarios? What are things going to look like if the ANC wins big? What does that mean for Ramaphosa? What happens if they only just scrape in? With the various camps already sharpening their knives for a potential slip-up?
Well, I think that's